Cillian Murphy's Tommy Shelby doesn't exist. The razor blades in the caps, a myth. The Shelby family empire, complete fiction. But the Peaky Blinders were real. A Birmingham street gang that terrorized England's industrial Midlands from the 1880s to 1920s. Young criminals, brutal violence, distinctive style. Here's the true story behind the hit Netflix series. What's fact? What's fiction? What lives in between? The origins, poverty and violence. The Peaky Blinders emerged from Birmingham during one of the darkest periods in British industrial history. During the reign of Queen Victoria, millions of working-class people flooded into Britain's booming industrial cities. Birmingham grew explosively. Factories multiplied, but housing didn't keep pace. Slum areas expanded rapidly. Overcrowded tenements, no sanitation, disease everywhere. Different social, religious, ethnic, and political groups were forced into cramped neighborhoods where they competed for scarce resources. The chasm between rich and poor widened dramatically. The welfare state wouldn't exist for decades. Young men without job prospects faced a brutal choice: starve legally or steal illegally. Many chose crime. Economic deprivation gave birth to violent street gangs throughout Birmingham's poorest districts. These weren't sophisticated criminal organizations. They were pickpockets and muggers. Young boys as young as 12 who started stealing to eat and graduated to assault and robbery as they got older. According to historian Carl Chin, author of The Real Peaky Blinders, these gangs had roots stretching back to the 1870s. Anti-Irish sentiments during that decade created tensions that exploded into gang warfare. Historian Barbara Weinberger explains that the anti-Irish movement offered a focus and target for inner-city youth frustrations, which became institutionalized in gang warfare. Irish immigrants formed defensive gangs called sloggers to protect themselves. These groups clashed regularly with police who raided their gambling operations. By the 1880s or 1890s, younger generations absorbed and transformed these slogging gangs into something more organized and more violent: the Peaky Blinders. The first written evidence. The earliest known written reference to the Peaky Blinders appears in the Birmingham Mail on March 24, 1890. The article details a brutal assault in Small Heath, Birmingham. A young man named George Eastwood was attacked at the Rainbow Public House on Adderley Street. The newspaper reported, "A serious assault was committed upon a young man named George Eastwood, living at 3 Court, 2 House, Arthur Street, Small Heath on Saturday night." Eastwood had gone to the pub and ordered ginger beer. He was a total abstainer from alcohol. Shortly after he arrived, several men known locally as the Peaky Blinders gang entered the establishment. They knew Eastwood by sight. They lived in the same neighborhood. Without provocation, they attacked him violently. The Daily Post described the incident as a murderous assault. The London Daily News identified the attackers specifically as members of the Small Heath Peaky Blinders. This represents the gang's debut in the national press, and they were proud of it. After the attack, gang members sent letters to various national newspapers declaring themselves as members of this specific group. They wanted their violence recorded. They wanted their reputation to spread. The gang was founded in Small Heath by a man named Thomas Mucklow. According to that 1890 newspaper article, Mucklow would become one of the most violent founding members, involved in organizing some of the gang's most brutal assaults. Who were the real Peaky Blinders? The Peaky Blinders weren't a single, unified gang. They were loosely affiliated groups operating across Birmingham's industrial districts. Unlike the fictional Shelby family, the real Peaky Blinders weren't related by blood. They were young criminals from lower to working class backgrounds who shared a common style and operated in the same territories. Ages ranged from as young as 12 to around 30. Most were teenagers and young men in their 20s. They engaged in robbery, violence, racketeering, illegal bookmaking, and control of gambling. They targeted anyone who looked vulnerable or weak. They showed no mercy. According to David Cross, curator of the West Midlands Police Museum, they would attack anyone who did not look strong or fit. Anything that could be taken, they would take. The gang operated primarily in the Small Heath and Bordsley districts of Birmingham. These were among the city's poorest neighborhoods, packed with factory workers living in squalor. Through the late 1890s and early 1900s, the Peaky Blinders controlled significant portions of Birmingham's underworld. They fought rival gangs like the Cheapside Sloggers for territorial control. These weren't abstract turf wars. Control of specific streets meant control of gambling, protection rackets, and illegal bookmaking operations. Money flowed from these activities, providing income in communities where legitimate work paid starvation wages. The style that defined them. One thing that set the Peaky Blinders apart from other gangs was their distinctive appearance. Arthur Matheson, a paint and varnish manufacturer who witnessed the gang firsthand, later described the archetypal Peaky Blinder as someone who took pride in personal appearance and dressed the part with skill. They wore tailored jackets, lapelled overcoats, button waistcoats, silk scarves, bell-bottom trousers, leather boots, and flat caps. The outfit was coordinated and deliberate. Their hair was prison-cropped all over except for a quiff in front, which was grown long and plastered down obliquely on the forehead. This hairstyle was called a donkey fringe. The flat cap was the signature item. They wore it pulled low over the left eye, with the peak shaped into a distinctive form. Gang members' girlfriends also adopted a recognizable look. They wore lavish displays of pearls and gaudy silk handkerchiefs draped over their throats, according to Philip Gooderson's The Gangs of Birmingham. The Peaky Blinders' dapper appearance belied their brutal treatment of rival gang members, police, and the general public. The name, origins, and myths. The exact origin of the name Peaky Blinders remains debated. Birmingham historian Carl Chin believes it's a reference to their style. Peaky referred to any flat cap with a peak. Blinder was familiar Birmingham slang still used today to describe something or someone of dapper appearance. An 1898 article in the English Dialect Dictionary offers another explanation. It describes young criminals who shaped the rim of their hard felt hats into a peaky form by pulling the hat over the knee. They then wore the hat low over the left eye, displaying the donkey fringe. Another theory suggests the name came from their criminal tactics. They would sneak up behind victims, pull the hat peak down over their faces so they couldn't identify their attackers, then rob them. But the most popular myth, perpetuated by the television series, is that they sewed razor blades into their cap peaks as weapons. This is almost certainly false. Historian Carl Chin told the Birmingham Mail that razor blades were only beginning to come in from the 1890s and were a luxury item, much too expensive for the Peaky Blinders to have used. The Gillette Company introduced the first replaceable safety razor system in 1903 in the United States. The first factory manufacturing them in Great Britain didn't open until 1908. During the Peaky Blinders' heyday in the 1890s, disposable razor blades simply weren't accessible to poor street criminals. The idea of razor blades sewn into caps is folk legend that developed later, probably inspired by the gang's reputation for violence and the fact that they did use their caps in fights, just not with hidden blades. Real gang members. Police mugshots and criminal records from the West Midlands Police Museum provide glimpses of actual Peaky Blinders members. Harry Fowler was arrested in 1904 for minor offenses. His mugshot shows a young man with a characteristic haircut and serious expression. After his arrest, Fowler fought in World War I. He spent 12 hours buried alive by a mortar bombardment and emerged with serious injuries. After the war, he made a living selling postcards of himself dressed as a female nurse. Ernest Bales appears in another mugshot with charges including shop breaking and bike theft. Stephen McHickey was arrested for similar petty crimes. His photograph shows the typical Peaky Blinder style: flat cap, neckerchief, intense stare. Thomas Gilbert became one of the most prominent members. He later adopted the alias Kevin Mooney and was considered one of the most powerful figures in the Birmingham underworld. Gilbert organized land grabs and territorial expansion. He was a major instigator in conflicts with rival gangs like the Cheapside Sloggers over control of profitable areas. Thomas Mucklow, the founding member, appeared in criminal records repeatedly. In 1902, he served 6 months for maliciously wounding George Groom, thought to be a fellow Peaky Blinder. By the time of the 1921 census, 57-year-old Mucklow was still living in Bordsley, Birmingham, with his wife Charlotte. He claimed his occupation was a carter for a local haulage company. Whether this was legitimate work or a cover for continued criminal activity is unknown. Rival gangs. The Peaky Blinders weren't the only gang terrorizing Birmingham. The Cheapside Sloggers were major rivals. They controlled different territories and clashed frequently with the Blinders over profitable areas for gambling and protection rackets. Slogger was a pugilistic term for someone who could strike a heavy blow in the ring. The Cheapside Sloggers earned their name through brutal street fighting in some of Birmingham's poorest districts. Territorial battles between gangs were common. They fought over specific streets and neighborhoods. Control meant money from illegal bookmaking, protection payments from businesses, and gambling operations. These postcode battles established power hierarchies understood by the criminal underworld but invisible to most law-abiding citizens. The Peaky Blinders dominated through violence and intimidation. They beat rivals in street fights. They attacked police officers. They terrorized ordinary people who crossed them. For roughly 30 years, from the 1890s to around 1920, the Peaky Blinders held control of Birmingham's criminal landscape. The decline. By the 1920s, the Peaky Blinders era was over. A larger, more organized gang called the Birmingham Boys, led by Billy Kimber, overtook them. Kimber was a very intelligent man with fighting ability, a magnetic personality, and shrewd awareness of the importance of alliances with London criminal networks. The Birmingham Boys operated with more sophistication than the Peaky Blinders ever had. They expanded beyond street-level crime into organized racketeering and large-scale illegal betting operations. By the 1920s, surviving Peaky Blinders had retreated to the West Midlands countryside. In the city itself, they were finished. The Birmingham Boys would themselves be overthrown in the 1930s by Charles Sabini's gang, which controlled London and expanded into Birmingham's lucrative racecourse gambling operations. But even after the original gang disappeared, the name Peaky Blinders persisted. It became synonymous slang in Birmingham for any street gang or criminal. The legend outlived the reality. Increasingly stringent policing also contributed to the gang's demise. Police cracked down harder on street violence. The justice system prosecuted gang members more aggressively. The social conditions that gave birth to the Peaky Blinders gradually improved as well. Labor movements gained strength. Wages slowly increased. The welfare state began forming after World War I, providing alternatives to crime for desperate young men. The Real Garrison Pub. In the television series, Tommy Shelby and his gang operate from their local pub, the Garrison. That location is based on a real tavern at 110 Garrison Lane, Birmingham. Records show the pub had a colorful and troubled history. In 1912, Thomas Alexander Palmer, the licensee, was charged with selling alcohol to a minor. By 1921, Herbert Edward Pickering and his family were running the pub. They're listed at that address on the night of the 1921 census. That same year, Pickering was involved in a case concerning the Garrison's rights to sell alcohol to Birmingham City football fans attending matches at nearby St. Andrew's Stadium. The Real Garrison Pub served the same working-class neighborhoods where the Peaky Blinders operated. It would have been familiar territory for gang members who frequented local drinking establishments. What the show got wrong. The hit Netflix series Peaky Blinders, created by Stephen Knight and starring Cillian Murphy, takes enormous creative liberties with history. First, the timeline. The show is set in the aftermath of World War I, starting around 1919 and extending through the 1920s and 30s. The real Peaky Blinders operated primarily from the 1880s to around 1920. By the time the show begins, the actual gang was already defunct. Second, the characters. Thomas Shelby and the entire Shelby family are completely fictional. There was no criminal mastermind building an empire from Birmingham to London to America. The real Peaky Blinders were petty criminals. They robbed people. They ran illegal gambling. They extorted local businesses. They didn't infiltrate Parliament or negotiate with foreign governments or build international criminal networks. Police mugshots detail their actual crimes: shop breaking, bike theft, assault, acting under false pretenses. These were street thugs, not sophisticated operators. Third, the scale. The show portrays the Peaky Blinders as having international ambitions and influence reaching across continents. In reality, they kept their focus intensely local. Their world was a few square miles of Birmingham's industrial districts. Fourth, the age. Many real Peaky Blinders were teenagers, some as young as 12 or 13. The show features mostly adult characters in their 20s, 30s, and beyond. Fifth, the organization. The show presents the Peaky Blinders as a unified family operation with clear leadership and structure. In reality, they were loosely affiliated gangs. The term Peaky Blinders described criminals exhibiting a certain style and operating in certain areas, not a single cohesive organization. Sixth, the wealth. Thomas Shelby and his brothers live in relative luxury, running legitimate businesses alongside criminal enterprises. The real Peaky Blinders were desperately poor. They committed crimes to survive, not to build empires. What the show got right. Despite these inventions, the series captures important truths about the era and the gang. The style is accurate. The real Peaky Blinders did dress distinctively. They wore flat caps, tailored jackets, and silk scarves. They took pride in their appearance even while living in poverty. The violence is accurate. The gang attacked people without provocation. They showed no mercy to rivals, police, or innocent bystanders. They were genuinely feared. The setting is accurate. The show's depiction of industrial Birmingham, the factories, the slums, the smoke, the poverty, reflects the harsh reality of life in late Victorian and Edwardian England. The economic context is accurate. The show understands that criminal gangs emerge from desperate poverty and lack of legitimate opportunities. Young men turn to crime because they had few alternatives. Some real historical figures appear as characters. Billy Kimber, who led the Birmingham Boys, is portrayed accurately as a powerful rival. Darby Sabini, the Italian gangster who controlled London's racecourses, is based on the real Charles Sabini. Winston Churchill appears as a character, which makes sense given his political prominence during this era. Stephen Knight's family connection. Creator. Stephen Knight drew inspiration from his own family history. In interviews, Knight revealed that his father told him stories about growing up in Birmingham. His father's uncles were actually called the Sheldons, not Shelbys, and they were known as Peaky Blinders. Knight's grandfather had been wounded in World War I and didn't get about easily. He sent Knight's father to deliver messages to these uncles, probably to place bets for illegal gambling operations. Knight's father described arriving at their place as a young boy, terrified. He knocked on the door. It opened to reveal a waft of cigarette smoke and the smell of whiskey and beer. Inside, immaculately dressed men sat around a table covered in money and coins in a neighborhood where there was no money. They had guns. They were drinking beer and whiskey out of jam jars. That image, those well-dressed criminals sitting around money in the midst of poverty, became the seed for the television series. Knight also drew from newspaper reports from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, mixing family folklore with documented history to create his fictionalized version of the Peaky Blinders world. The cultural legacy. Though the original Peaky Blinders disappeared a century ago, their legend persists. The Netflix series, which ran for 6 seasons from 2013 to 2022, introduced the gang to a global audience. Cillian Murphy's performance as Thomas Shelby became iconic. The show's success sparked renewed interest in Birmingham's criminal history. Historians like Carl Chin published books detailing the real gang's activities. Museums created exhibitions featuring police mugshots and criminal records. Tourism in Birmingham increased as fans visited locations associated with the real and fictional Peaky Blinders. The series spawned a feature film, Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man, released on Netflix in March 2026. Set during World War II and starring Cillian Murphy alongside Barry Keoghan as Tommy Shelby's son, the film continues the fictional story decades after the real gang ceased to exist. The cultural impact extends beyond entertainment. The Peaky Blinders represent a specific moment in British history when rapid industrialization created massive inequality and social upheaval. Their story reflects broader themes about poverty, violence, and survival in harsh economic conditions. Modern audiences connect with the underdog narrative, poor men fighting against a system rigged against them, even if their methods were brutal and their morality questionable. The difference between legend and truth. It's a version of the truth, a story that has been told again and again until it starts to feel completely real, even if parts of it are not, because stories are not fixed. They don't stay the same. They change over time, they grow, they evolve. They become more dramatic, more emotional, more powerful. And in that process, something important slowly fades away. The reality. Most legends don't begin as something extraordinary. They don't start with greatness, they begin small, with real people, living real lives, facing real struggles. People who are not perfect, people who make mistakes, who fail more than they succeed, who feel fear, doubt, and uncertainty. People who don't have all the answers. They are simply trying to survive, trying to improve, trying to move forward one step at a time, just like everyone else. But then their story gets told. At first, it sounds normal, simple, honest, real. But as more people hear it and more people repeat it, something begins to change. Small details start to shift. Moments get slightly exaggerated. Actions become a little more impressive. Decisions start to look more intentional than they really were. And slowly, without anyone realizing, the truth begins to transform. Not because people are lying on purpose, but because people naturally reshape stories. They fill in gaps, they remove confusion, they make things easier to understand. Because a clean story is easier to remember and easier to share. Over time, the story becomes more polished, more structured, more complete, but also less real. The struggles get simplified, the failures start to disappear, the uncomfortable parts are pushed aside, and what remains is a version that feels perfect, a version that feels inspiring, a version that feels powerful. But real life is never that clean. Behind every story, there are layers that remain hidden. The fear before making a decision, the hesitation before taking a risk, the moments of doubt that almost stopped everything, the failures that happened quietly, without anyone noticing, the times things didn't work and no one was there to see it. These are the parts that don't get shared because they don't sound impressive. They don't fit into a perfect narrative, but they matter more than anything else because that is where the truth exists. The truth is not always exciting. It's not always inspiring. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes it feels like nothing is happening at all. But it's real. And real has a different kind of power, a deeper power, because it shows life as it actually is, not as we imagine it to be. And that matters more than we think. Because when we only see perfect stories, we start expecting perfect outcomes. We start believing that success should look smooth, fast, and predictable. And when our own journey doesn't look like that, we feel lost. We feel like we're doing something wrong. We feel like we're behind. But the reality is, we are comparing our real life to a version of someone else's story that has been edited over time, a version where the struggles were reduced and the success was highlighted. That comparison is not fair. It was never meant to be. So when we hear powerful stories, we need to pause, not to reject them, but to understand them more deeply, to look beyond what is being shown, to question what might be missing. Because every story has two sides, the visible side and the hidden side. The visible side is clear. It makes sense. It flows smoothly. It feels complete. But the hidden side, that's where things are real. That's where you find the confusion, the uncertainty, the setbacks, the moments where everything almost fell apart. That's where the real journey exists. And that's the part most people never see because it's not easy to explain, it's not easy to show, but it's the most honest part of the story. And in the end, the truth will always be more valuable than the legend because legends can inspire us, but truth can guide us. Truth teaches us that progress is not perfect, that growth takes time, that failure is not the end, but part of the process. It reminds us that real success is not a straight line. It's unpredictable. It's uneven. It's filled with moments that don't look important, but actually define everything. So don't just accept stories at face value. Go deeper, think more carefully, look beyond the surface. Because sometimes the most important part of any story is the part that is never told, the quiet moments, the difficult decisions, the internal struggles, the parts that don't look impressive, but shape everything. And once you begin to understand that, your perspective changes. You stop chasing perfect stories. You stop comparing yourself to unrealistic expectations. And you start seeing things clearly. You start understanding that your journey doesn't have to look perfect to be meaningful. That progress doesn't have to be fast to be real. And that struggle doesn't mean failure. It means you're moving. Because real life is not a legend. It's not designed to impress, it's designed to be lived. Step by step, moment by moment, with all its imperfections. And the more you accept that, the more powerful your own story becomes. Not because it's perfect, but because it's honest, because it's real. And in the end, that's what truly matters.